What do you do when you're used to showing up strong, but life asks you to be still instead? Today's conversation is about the season that doesn't look like progress, when momentum stalls, certainty fades, and waiting might actually be the work.
Welcome to What Could Go Right, a podcast about living boldly on and off the water. I'm Eric Orton.
I'm Emily Orton.
And in 2014, we bootstrapped a year on a fixer-upper sailboat with our 5 kids. We wrote a book about it called 7 at Sea, and that book became a New York Times top 10 travel book.
On this podcast, we explore adventure, connection, and stepping into a more intentional life. And we don't just talk about it, we practice it. We invite you to join us on playful, guided sailing trips around the world.
And if you stick around to the end of this episode, you'll hear our sailing update where we share where we're going, when, and which trips still have space. And you can hear our sailing takeaway where you'll hear from somebody who's actually come on a sailing trip with us already.
Let's dive in. Okay, our guest today is Ganel-Lyn Condie. Hi, Ganel-Lyn.
Friends,
Thank you so much for coming.
It's good to be with you.
It's so good to have you. So many people know you as a speaker, an author, and an advocate. But what drew us to this conversation is this quieter season that you've experienced in your life. You've walked through chronic illness, deep personal loss, and just a stretch of waiting where the next chapter did not arrive on schedule. And in that stillness, you have been learning something about trust, readiness, and what it means to keep becoming, even when it looks like nothing is happening. So I'm so grateful to you for joining us to talk about such a vulnerable arena that so many people are familiar with, but so few people are discussing.
Well, you two have been instrumental in this specific season. And so it feels awesome to take our informal friendship conversations and formalize it on a recording.
Can we talk about how we met, actually?
Yeah, go for it.
Because we were on a ship together.
Yeah.
We
I
were
think
both-
Emily and I met each other first. Did we meet each other
That's
first?
true.
Yeah,
I was catching up to you guys.
we met at a gathering of women, and I felt so funny. It was influencers, which I have never felt like that word applied to me, but we were there, and it was so great to meet each other.
But we didn't have a lot. It was a big gathering of a lot of women over a couple of days, and so we didn't have a lot of one-on-one. But then we got to be on a ship together, which felt like your natural habitat and my not natural habitat.
But I remember we showed up at the airport and you were wearing full hot pink. And I was like,
at the gate.
let's go. And before we got on the plane, we had sorted our children's lives out. It's been unsorted since, but it was a good start.
We were trying to arrange marriages between our kids.
Yes.
And you were sassy to me right off the bat. I can't remember exactly what you were saying.
But you love that.
But yeah, and just so you know, for our listeners, this was on a cruise ship. We were both invited to be presenters, and a cruise ship is not our natural habitat. I was so uncomfortable on that boat, not because the boat was uncomfortable, but I was like, this is not anything related to what I know about a boat to be.
Well, and that was only my 3rd cruise. I had done 1 cruise before COVID with another event planning travel group in the attempts, because I knew I was really motion sick tendencies. And so they had arranged a discounted quick West Coast cruise to see if I could handle it before they booked an event. And then COVID happened and shut the world down. Fast forward, a whole nother company comes, and I had worked with them, and it's the one we were with, and I had done one the year before, and I was super uncomfortable because that was my first working cruise. And it's a different dynamic because if you're out of your stateroom, you're working. You know,
people are talking to you in the hallways. They're talking to you at the line of the cafeteria.
Yes. And they've paid to have access to you in addition to your on stage time and your meet and greet times that are scheduled. So I was a little more familiar because I had done it the year before. By Zofran is my friend, and I had purchased one of those little wrist zappers to help with motion sickness the first time I had presented, and it worked. But, I just was grateful to have, because we are in similar stages of life with adult kids. And it was fun to hot tub with you and talk with you guys. But your presentation, I remember exactly, it was a year ago this month, because my mother-in-law got sick while we were on that cruise, and she ended up passing 2 weeks after we got back off that trip.
We were bicycling through Key West while you were
on
the phone figuring out what's going on with mom.
And that bicycling on Key West is core memory for me. That was such a magical day that I was like, if every vacation with friends was going to feel like that, then I would do a lot more of it. because it was so magical. But I remember thinking I was going to present on Valentine's Day, and like it's almost exactly a year. Do you guys realize that? Like
Yeah.
I presented on the Sunday we got on the ship, and it ended like right after Valentine's, like the 15th. And then Mom died a week after that. But you guys were just such a great, your presentation, just to plug you.
Plug us on our own show.
I'm going to plug you on your own show. I was a year and a half into what we're going to talk about today, but you said some essential things, because I think anytime you're wandering in the wilderness or you're on a journey of the unknown and you're not sure the new destination, you guys gave such great concrete analogies that I was like, okay, I feel like sometimes I've been lost at sea. And like no one even realizes I'm gone. And like no one's searching anymore. Like they've already done the memorial for me, and like she's dead. That's how it's felt the last 2.5 years, professionally and personally. And I just felt really seen. Also because you watched me present before you presented. And my love language is words of affirmation, and specific words of affirmation. And Emily Lake had notes about like why I was a gifted presenter and why I was so effective on stage. And that was essential, like life raft, oxygen, because I do still feel somewhat like I'm lost at sea. And it was kind of like a beacon saying, you have all the tools you need. You're on the boat. You're fine. I know you feel like you're drifting, but you have the skills you need. And it was because Emily didn't just go, oh, great job. That was fabulous. It was so good. It was like, and this, and you said this, and you did this. And then I think, Eric, you came in with some deets, as the kids say.
I try to follow Emily's good example.
So that's our origin story a little bit. And you guys are really beautiful examples to me. And you came, we can talk about it today, but I think for me in my faith, God plants clarifying people in fog times, and you have been that.
Oh, that is a nice thing to hear.
I'm so grateful that we were able to cross with each other at that time. And it was such a tender season. And yeah, I remember everything I said, just like, you are incredible at your craft, and really giving so much love and respect to the audience, and recognizing how they're going to learn, and giving them stories to grasp onto, and humor to bring levity to the seriousness of the topics that you're talking about, and making it so relatable so that they can actually feel like they can move forward. And so, yeah, if anybody's thinking about, you want a speaker, you should definitely
Thank you.
reach out to Ganel-Lyn, because you'll come on looking like a supermodel, and then they find out that you're actually like their completely relatable best friend who knows them better than they know themselves.
That spends most of the time looking homeless. I did shower for you guys today, and
we're honored. We're honored. We showered as well.
Wow.
We're here for each other.
Anyway, I would love to get it. Like, one of the things that I see right behind you is Sourdough and the Savior, and this is a book that has come out of this season of Stillness. So we'll probably get around to talking about it a little later, because I just think it's so beautiful. Like, even in a season of stillness, and when it seems like you are waiting for the next chapter, or you're not sure what the move is, or if anybody even cares, and yet it was this creative season. So where do you think, like, if you were talking to someone who's in a season like this, where would you start with them? Or do you want us to give us like some of your background story first, and then draw from it?
Yeah, I'd love to just have our listeners hear what this season is.
Yeah, what is this season?
So yesterday at the time of this taping was my 55th birthday. And I had a friend write me a birthday poem and email it to me, which is so like classic 55-year-old, MO, right? How about I email you? And it was about the woman who's becoming. And so I think that's important, because I think if anyone in your audience is entering in empty nesting middle age, there is some built-in part of my story that just, I think, happens. And I wasn't prepared for it, because over the last 15 years, I have been so honored to be the mother of 2 miracle kids. I have 2 miracle children. They're 28. My son is 28. My daughter is 22. It took 7 years to have our son and 6 years to have our daughter. Like, I fought with my life to get them here. But I've been intentional, at least I would say the last 15 to 20 years, to have side gigs. Something that was an identifier separate from mothering, even though I've always kind of had a home office, and as a speaker and an author and a business owner, podcast host, this was my home base literally so that I can be at the front door where my kids are coming in, and I could schedule based on, like, I would say yes to speaking requests, but if there were too many on the calendar, I would say my next available is, and that's kind of how I juggled it the last 10, 15 years with kids at home. My sister died 12 years ago at the age of 40 to suicide, and so that kind of changed my why. And I felt like I had purposefully planned ahead. And I know, like, in mental health work that I do, you can't pre-grieve, but I think I thought I had done that. I think I thought I had set myself up that by the time my last child left home, then that, like, juggle of work-life balance was going to be done. And my husband's career was kind of up-leveling to a whole nother intensity level at the same time my last child left home. And what happened is a series of endings. So she left within a few weeks. The weekly podcast I was hosting, that I loved hosting, that had received awards, that had, you know, book products attached to it, abruptly ended. And I had gone through an accident where my wrist had been shattered, and so I'd had multiple surgeries on my wrist. This all happened within the same few months, and it was too much. It, like, rocked me in a way that I was like, wait, I thought I had become pretty self-aware and I wasn't hooked too much into identifiers like mothering and all these other labels we give ourselves of, like, purpose. And that's not to...
You're saying you're mothering, like your kids left, your podcast ended.
Yes.
This accident. And so a lot, as your husband Rob is kind of
exploding,
just like on-ramping to new thing.
Yeah. Grows a mustache. It looks amazing. He's going to the gym. He's announced as the new CEO of his company that he's been the CFO of. He gets an assignment in church that is, like, high leadership, busy. And I feel like my world is becoming smaller. And not only that, like, personally and professionally, the company that I had published 10 years worth of books with, like, we're talking 15 books plus, the publishing world was changing and they were going through layoffs, and they had produced my show. So that side of my life was also, like, a lot of people know that my show ended, and I still am stopped 2.5 years later almost weekly about people that missed that show, but they don't realize that my publisher that published my books was also involved with that show. So that relationship of 10 years was ending. And I just really went through, I'm still in it. You know, I think, like, Emily, thank you for rejoicing about this little book that just launched. I did the cruise. I still speak here and there. I still do TV and radio once in a while. I didn't, like, become a hermit and not leave my house. But the core part of my stewarding had always been mothering. And there had always, well, at least for the last 10 plus years, there had always been a weekly show. And so those are two pretty core things that created opportunities for me to nurture and create and give and contribute into the world in a meaningful way. Because I think mothering is one of the most meaningful things you can do to contribute in the world. And so it rocked me. And I talked to wise people the last 2.5 years, a lot of wise people, including both of you. I don't always like how I felt about me. I haven't always liked how I have shown up. For example, like, if your guests have been on here talking about what could go right, I could tell you hours of stories, and I've shared them with you privately, where little things kept going wrong. It wasn't just these big core things had ended. It was like, I don't know, I felt cursed. Some opportunity would happen. Like, I was in meetings all last year with maybe a new book rep agent, right? That was going to help me in booking, corporate speaking, and maybe do a corporate product. And that went on for months and months, back and forth, and that ended and didn't materialize. Like, there were so many little things that I kept trying to stay in this hopeful place of, like, curiosity. And I know you guys teach that, and, like, what could go right. And I would, like, have a disappointment, and then I would, like, feel the feelings and then pump myself up again and then try the next thing, and it would be like fizzle over and over. And so I think from the outside lens, if you follow me on social media, it definitely doesn't look like I stopped showing up, but there was there's not been a replacement of some really foundational identifiers and places for me to show up, if that makes any sense at all.
To me, it makes a lot of sense, and I'll throw some ideas out there, I think, that connect for us, and we can talk about it some more. Is for one, today was sort of a monumental day in our lives. Our youngest turned 18, Lily. She has Down syndrome.
Sweet Lily.
And so we were at the courthouse today getting everything arranged for guardianship of her. And to come to this closure, and I think especially this is for Emily, who has been done a lion's share of the hands-on raising of our kids, to kind of put a button on that in sort of a way like, we're her guardians, so we're going to be taking care of her the rest of her life in some form or fashion.
The rest of our lives.
Right, the rest of our life. And the same thing with our kids, but it's a very definite, it's a mile marker. And it was a day of celebration. Like, we took pictures and we went out. She wanted to go to Chick-fil-A, so we had lunch at Chick-fil-A.
To be fair, I will say, like, after the judge approved our motion, she also added a requirement that we go to lunch at a place of Lily's choosing. And we're like, we're already planning on it. Like, we will definitely do so. Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah, so we respected the court's directive and went to Chick-fil-A. But just to your point, I feel like especially Emily, and to a certain extent myself as well, kind of putting a button on this child rearing, where Lily's graduating from high school in the spring, and we're figuring out a lot of things about life that are going to shift for us. And I would say more for my part, going back to the very beginning of our book, 7 at Sea, that's where this story began, where my whole career just like exploded. And
in a bad way.
In a bad, like, yeah, explode, like a grenade went off.
Not in a Rob Condie way.
No, not in a skyrocket way.
Like Rob's, your husband's career is taking off. Mine like got nuked, basically.
Which we've lived through that too. I think that's important to say, is that as we've been married this June 35 years, and we've gone through 2 significant unemployments and over a year of almost 2 years of underemployment. And so it's also interesting when we're having this conversation that you just say, Eric, that like empty nesting has felt different for Rob than me.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't want my wilderness season of identity crisis and loss to overshadow that we have fought together a long time for him to have these opportunities. And sometimes I feel like I'm the Eeyore in the room, because he's having every dream come true that he thought had died. He's 56 and he thought, we'll never have an IRA, we'll never have a savings account, we'll never have a retirement plan, we'll never have, because he had aged to the point where he was too expensive for companies to hire. And so he kind of had gotten his dreams so small. He is living the biggest dreams he couldn't have dreamed. And I am literally on the opposite side. And that's an important thing to offer your audience, because sometimes in marriage, I was saying this to some friends the other day, I think marriage is a dance between growth cycles and recovery cycles and death cycles. And never, I mean, we've had seasons where we're both in a death cycle. We've had seasons where we're both in a growth cycle. And then we've had this season where we're the opposite. And I think, how do you navigate a support of one another while also a sensitivity and patience with, like, Rob has his, you guys have gotten to know him, his strengths and weaknesses, and my strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's am I so grateful I'm not alone in this. I felt such a gratitude to Rob that, like, I wasn't forced to have to go get a job to put food on the table while I'm figuring some of this stuff out. And that's in large measure to what he's doing. But it's a glaring opposite of what I'm experiencing personally and professionally. And I don't always love how I show up in our marriage because of that. I don't love it.
But you're saying there's complexity here. We're trying to be same team, and I want to cheer for him, and I also want his empathy, and also his success is sort of highlighting what feels like this uncertain, quiet season that I wasn't seeking.
Yeah, I mean, in a really practical way of that is he works long hours. He leaves for the gym at 4:30 in the morning and he comes home around 7. And many times he gets caught in meetings with doctors and he's not coming home when he says. And I have tried to lean into this quieter season. And sometimes I get frustrated when I'm like, listen, I've come up with some plans for when you're really not going to be home, but you got to tell me. And I don't want that resentment. I want to be supportive of the fact he's been in 20 meetings today and he comes home and wants to not talk. And I've sometimes, like, I'm in the middle. Yeah, I'm in the
I just want to talk to somebody.
to somebody. And I'm in the middle of book promotion right now. So I'm doing a lot of podcast interviews and things. But the last like 2 years, it's not been that. It's been a lot more of grandma era. And I'm not a grandma yet, like gardening and learning to make sourdough and talking to my dog and going for walks. And I've been grateful. That has felt very sacred. It felt uncomfortable, and it has felt uncomfortable. But when all those endings happen almost like a domino, I could feel God in it. And I could feel God like I could easily have distracted and run and filled up the gap and been busy and said yes to, I mean, immediately some people were like, hey, do you want to be on this advisory board? Do you want to? And I could feel almost this panic of like, it's going to be so quiet, and hanging out with just me that much is probably not good for anybody. And yet I also felt kind of a restraint to not just fill up that space with busyness and sound and to-do lists. And yet that was very discombobulating to realize, I think I shared this with you, Emily, from 0 to when that all started to happen, whether it was my kid's next grade or my next grade, then I got married, then I had kids. Like there was always a clear next thing. Like you just said about Lily, it's like, now what?
Right. I'm not grieving the empty nest thing. I'm just like, I will never have an empty nest. And that's a different grief.
Totally.
And I
And
don't have a lot of mentors in that.
Yeah. My co-hosts that we were doing the show with, they have a nonverbal daughter that will live with them the rest of their lives. You know, they've had to adjust in a different way, right? And yet there's also this sense of like any child over the age of 18, then what? Like then the wilderness opens for, I have 2 adult kids that are navigating that season very differently. And so that certainty that we have as human beings that come kind of with like birth to first grade to second grade to high school graduation to maybe marriage to kids to raising kids, that is all exciting, but scary. And so I just want to validate like, and I just want to express gratitude that there's not a lot of language maybe in our culture around what those passings or those monuments feel like. Like I'm glad the judge was like, go get Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
But I'm almost thinking like, what's the ceremony? What's the Chick-fil-A ceremony for like your Down syndrome daughter that turns 18 and you like raised her, but now what? You know? And so I think a year ago when we were on the ship together, it's amazing to be a year later being, I'm still, you know, I have a new book out, but still not quite sure what's going on. And I don't know if you're going to feel this way with Lily because we don't have that same stewardship, but parenting just changes 18 and on. It just, it's like I still see myself in this almost more intense support role as a parent of adult kids, and yet the access points aren't there and the data points aren't there, you know? And
Yeah,
so it's like,
that's really
did I
true.
parent today? I don't know.
Well, we definitely have our 4 older kids where there's a lot going on. We just helped our one daughter move to Japan with her
I
husband.
know.
And so, you know, we were pretty involved with that. And we have another daughter who I'll be discreet because, you know, she's getting married the end of this spring and I'm talking to her after I get on this call and then with her future fiance. And so those are...
We talked to our missionary today, and our middle daughter has a 6-month-old and just found out she's pregnant. So she's like leaning in for support. It is a different kind. It's the kind where, you know, you have to know how much you can give, but also say like, what do you actually need? Because I'm no longer going to just like assume give. Like you're going to like, what do
are
you
the
need?
boundaries?
Yeah. Being really respectful and supportive of those boundaries, and always like, how can I help you?
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you were saying, though, because you entered in this season of stillness. And I think one of the things that really did force you to be still was your injury and your double surgery. Like, oh, I got it fixed and I did therapy and recovered and I couldn't take care of myself at all. And then I had to go back and do the surgery again and go through that whole season again. But you're also saying there was some agency involved and there was some choice making where opportunities were given to you. And you recognized, I want to say yes because I'm panicking, but I'm also not going to say yes because it's coming from a place of panic. And I'm really curious about like that dynamic because that sounds very brave to me. And it sounds like either that there was some wisdom you were drawing on or there was some inspiration that you were receiving to let you know that this season of Stillness had a purpose to it?
Well, I mean, you and I have talked, 55 is no joke, and hormone replacement is no joke for me. And if you want to say what are the gifts of becoming middle-aged, it's that I hope that in living some life, you become more attuned to what is a yes. And in my 30s, and maybe even into my 40s, it was like, yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. Like everything was a yes. Because I was going to be the mom and I worked on a magazine and I did PR and I did TV and now the yes has to be really, really clear. But thank you for acknowledging that it took a lot of courage many times to be like, that doesn't feel like a yes. And yet that means I'm left with a lot of space still. But I am of an age. I don't know if Emily, you're feeling this way, but I am of an age now that like, I don't want to betray myself. Mm-hmm. I'm not willing to hustle so much. Don't get me wrong, I'm willing to work hard, but I've developed the muscle of stillness, and I'm not willing to sacrifice the clarity that comes with that or the sacredness of that to just hustle for followers or sales or approval or busyness, just so I don't have to be alone with myself. And yeah. I know that's speaking somewhat from privilege. I have thought so much the last 2.5 years of the women that are 55 living in a third world country that literally it's day to day, go get the food, find the food. And sometimes that guilt has creeped in. I went back into therapy a year ago and I found a therapist that was of my age in my season of life. Because I was like, I've had lots of great therapists over the years and I advocate for people finding good therapists. But I was like, I need someone that can just kind of understand that I am so grateful for so much. There is no cancer diagnosis that I know of. There's no like homelessness that we're dealing with. We've lived through some really tough stuff in our marriage. From my chronic illness to my sister's death to unemployment to raising kids and the trauma that sometimes comes. I know how privileged I am to have a season of slowdown, but it was scary. Mm-hmm. And so now when something comes, I didn't want to miss what this was about because I have a sense, I don't want to say this and I don't know, not jinx it, but I have a sense this isn't going to stay this way forever. This isn't how it's always going to be. And I don't want to miss what this was about because it felt divinely orchestrated. And so out of panic or my human condition, I don't want to just say yes. Like I said no to a red carpet movie event a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't had FOMO in a long time, but I was like, I said no because it felt like a no, like stay home tonight. And for the next couple of weeks and even now, there's billboards all over the freeway of that movie. And I was invited to the red carpet event and I saw all the people I love that ended up going to that event. And I've seen the reviews on the movie and how great it was. And I think it's just each time I see a billboard or someone post about it, I'm like, maybe it's cool reminder like I've come to the age where I am willing to say no and be home.
Yeah.
And not show up and not be on the red carpet and does that come with 55? And that's okay. I don't have to be in every room now. I don't have to, yeah. And I don't want that. I don't know if that makes sense. I want to contribute. I want to have meaningful conversations in the world. I still want to feel like this, whatever second half of my life contributes to hope in the universe, and in a culture right now that doesn't always feel very hopeful. I want to be a part of that. I don't know what that's going to look like, but part of that, this transition has been being okay with like, I'm missing out and I'm okay with that.
I think that actually to me is an indication of a lot of confidence because having been there, especially in our New York years when it was like, I wanted to work on the hot shows. I wanted to, be at the award ceremonies and kind of be on the scene a lot. I think a lot of it was because I was trying to prove something to myself, or I really cared about perception of other, like how other people perceived me. And as I've gotten older, I like to think that I don't worry about that as much. And so what you're describing to me, I think it's like a kind of maturity.
Thank you.
That's how I see it.
Thank you.
And there's a story actually in your new book, Sourdough and the Savior by Ganel-Lyn Condie, available now, starting now, whenever you hear this. But you tell a really surprising story, which I actually shared with Eric last night. He's been out traveling, so I had the advantage of getting to read this whole thing before he did. But you told a story about your piano tuner. It had such a reverse experience from what you would expect.
Wasn't that the coolest story?
I was very surprised because so many times when we think about like what could go right and we think about things getting bigger,
Yep.
better, more money, more famous, more security. So I don't know if
we
you,
recap
if you feel comfortable,
Yeah, so
do you
he's
mind
been my-
recapping?
Yeah, he's been my piano tuner for quite a few years, and I love the yearly visits because then he sits and plays Claire de Lune. Am I saying that right, Eric?
Yes, you are.
Okay. And it's just like a gift. Like it's my own little private concert. He finishes. My piano is the piano I grew up playing. So it was bought in the 70s. I was born in 71, and it's old. And like we had to replace the bench this year from a bench on Amazon because we can't repair the bench. But he plays this, and I had seen online that he had opened a storefront where he was selling pianos, as well as this business of tuning pianos that he had worked for years. And he has a young family, and his wife had had a baby. So after he finished tuning, I was like, hey, I just saw you had closed the business. And I was assuming and projecting that it was because effects of post-pandemic and like supply problems or, you know, efforts of the economy that like people aren't going to buy big ticket items like pianos anymore. And that's why he had closed the brick and mortar store. And he said, no, actually, it was booming. Like I was making bank, and to the point where I was driving to Park City, which you both know, like there's a lot of money up there, to look at property to open a second location. And I can't even talk about this story without feeling the emotion of this young father with a thriving business. And he had seen this property where it would be great to open up a second location. And he clearly, through God, heard, like, you could, or you could close the first one down. And he shared with me, like, having a brick and mortar meant, you know, he didn't see his kids on Saturdays, and he was seeing them after they were in bed at nights. And it was going really well, but he realized in that moment, what if it went smaller, and what would be the payoff of that? And so he went home and talked to his wife, and, you know, she was just 100% in his corner and made those decisions together. And he was back to, you know, moving pianos and tuning pianos. And I said
Spending more
to
time
him,
with his kids and with his wife and the weekends and
yeah. And I said to
meetings.
him, man, do you know what happened in that? Other than you get more time with your kids at night and on the weekends. And as someone that has gone through seasons of underemployment and unemployment, and my husband was unemployed for almost a year. And that season of time, my son and he went on a 50-miler hike with his scout group, and they still talk about that. And all the other leaders had to bail last minute, and Rob had no job, and Rob could go. Rob lost 10 pounds on that 50-miler. Like, they got hurt.
That's what I need to do.
Yeah.
I've been looking for that answer. Sorry, thank you. Keep going with
He
your
has a
story.
scar on his leg. They talk about this fight they had on the hike where Rob was just like, Cam! And they laugh about it. And more than that, I mean, my kids had access to their dad, and we didn't know how to put food on the table. Like, it was not a great time. We had some savings, but we ended up selling everything, our sleeping bags, our Christmas trees, our house for an $80,000 loss. So I shared this with my piano tuner. I said, you're never going to regret time with your kids. But more than that, what muscle you built is that God knows that you'll hear him and do it. Mm-hmm. And that, I was like, that muscle, you can learn it the hard way or the easy way. And I feel like you took courage and faith and mixed it up and did the opposite of what the world tells you to do. You did not scale it. You did not franchise it. You did not make more money, build a bigger house. You decided what you valued, you know? And I mean, I think, isn't it Rupert Murdoch, or who is it that still lives in the same house and he's the richest man? I don't know who it is.
Oh yeah, it
Hathaway,
is.
Yeah.
But
I'm reading the Stoic Daily Stoic book right now, and they just brought him up as an example of like knowing what you value and having that be your choices, guiding your choices versus what scarcity will tell you or the world will tell you or what culture will tell you. For this young dad, I was just sitting in awe of him. I was just sitting in awe of him of like, man, I said to him, I cannot wait to see what the next 20 years brings you. If you already hear God like that and do that, man, he's like, I know who I can work with. This guy. This is the guy I can talk to that's going to hear me and do the courageous thing. And because I've had to learn that a harder way. You know what I mean? Like, well, I've had to learn it a harder way.
As a provider, I have a lot of thoughts about the things that you're saying. And I really have a lot of admiration for this piano tuner guy because
it's emotional, right?
Well, there's a story that Emily and I love about the Mexican fisherman. And have you ever heard the story of the Mexican fisherman?
I don't think so. But
okay, if everyone hasn't heard this story, this is a classic.
It's a classic. So there's the Mexican fisherman who's out.
Wait, did you tell it to me or did I just hear it?
I don't know.
Heard it somewhere. I just remembered it. And is it like, why do I want all of that? And then it's like, but I can still play my guitar and be home with my kid.
Yeah. So then I'll just tell it real quick, and then we can talk about it. So this guy is on vacation. He's an investment banker from New York or something, and he's hanging out, in Mexico, and he talks to this guy who's a fisherman, and maybe he was taking him fishing or something. But basically, he fishes a few hours a day. He catches enough to feed his family and has a little bit to sell or share with his neighbors, and then the rest of his time he's able to be with his family. And then he's able to play and his friends, and he plays guitar. And the guy's like, well, you know what? You've got a good thing. You've got a good thing going here. If you fished more than just the 3 hours a day that you go out, if you fished like 6 or 9 or 12 hours a day, you can catch more fish. You can build up some capital. Then you can buy more boats. Then you can afford to hire some people to do the fishing for you. And eventually you'll have a fleet. And eventually, once you've built up your fleet of fishing, your fishing empire, then you can sell it. And he's like, what do I do then? Well, then you can just fish a few hours a day. You can spend your time with your wife and your kids and hang out with your friends, and you can play the guitar in the evening. And he's like, that's what I do right now.
Yep.
And so we always
the opposite of the American dream, right?
Yeah. And so, it's funny because I have a lot of those same ambitions. I'm the guy that likes to scale things. I'm the guy that likes to multiply them. And then, what's the exit strategy and all that sort of stuff. And I need to check myself sometimes. I don't think those are bad things. I'm not trying to say they're bad things. I'm in the middle of some of it right now. But I know that when we chose to take a step back and quit working and go sailing for a year, it was sort of with this. I had read the Mexican fisher story recently at this time. And we just thought, this is a window of time that we have with our kids. Totally. And this is never coming again. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity when our kids are at home. And I guess now our kids are older, and someday your piano tuner's kids will be older. You can make money at any stage in your life.
Yep.
And to know that you can, and you chose not to, and say, I'm going to do that later. And I think what you're exemplifying and what he's exemplifying is that we can be deliberate about the seasons of our lives, and we don't have to operate from a place of scarcity, which says, I have to do it all right now.
Yeah.
At the expense of the different components of my life, I have to work and earn and build now because it has to happen now or it won't happen. And I think Rob's story is a great example of that, saying he's having his phase of success. It was probably a long, lonely wilderness, a long drought, and then to be getting to this now. But sometimes we choose the phases and the seasons, and sometimes they're chosen for us.
Well, can I say 2 things on that? I love the reminder of that story because now I'm sitting here thinking, where did I just hear that story? Because I thought of you guys. I'm like, I need to tell the Ortons this story. That's so funny. And it had an impact on me as well of like, culturally, different cultures around the globe put different emphasis on different things. And I think what's beautiful I do a lot of interfaith work, and when you learn other cultures and religions, you see where it becomes a lens of like, hey, I could up this in my life because look how well these people are embracing this part of their culture, their religion, or whatever. I think as women, I have a 22-year-old daughter that is going to Asia for study abroad in May, and she's living this, like, I just, like, relish being around her right now because she's in the Brooklyn season. Like, that's what we call it. Like, it's the Brooklyn season of college and dating and working and applying for her program and going to Asia and all that. And she wants to be a mom so badly one day. And so I often tell her, like, you get options I didn't even know. Like, when I was wanting to be a mom and fill in the gap, it was like there were these 3 paths. There was no online option or, virtual option or eBay stores or, and so sometimes she'll ask advice and I'm like, just the only advice I will give you is it's okay to live in seasons. As women, especially in our culture, where what Eric was just saying about like, there's this like sense of right now, almost like every young mom I know needs to have a side gig. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, what if you just did the park? I mean, those days drove me crazy. Playing Legos, just my brain cells were dying some days because I was like, same laundry, same dishes, same Legos, over again. And now I would give $1 million to have like one random day where we just did Barbies and Legos again, you know? I guess that's what grandparenting is going to be. But I just think giving ourselves permission to live seasons and not live all seasons at the same time. And then the second thought I just want to share there is we just had a really cool thing. I think Rob will be great that I'm sharing this with you. 8 years ago, we went to a fabulous restaurant in downtown Salt Lake called The Roof. And it's close to where you guys live, so you know. And it was closed down for quite a few years for refurb, and they just reopened in November. 8 years ago, Rob was a CFO of a totally different company, and it was a family-owned business, and he did that 3 times. 3 different CFO positions with family-owned businesses is a whole different trip, you know? Because you're dealing with the uncles and the cousins and the dynamics, and you're the outside money guy who's like trying to hold everyone accountable. And we went to our Christmas dinner with the executive team of that previous job in the exact room 8 years later where we were just sat this week with his new executive team and spouses. Now, 8 years ago, when we left that dinner, we had a fight on the way home. He doesn't love that I was
Right.
I was right. We got in the car and there was this sense of like he had gone through enough disappointments, unemployments, underemployments that it was like, okay, maybe I just need to be okay with where things are at. And for some reason I was spicy that day and I was like, I see more for you. And he could not see it. And I think this is what's brilliant about having a partnership and having coaches and having podcasts and having good friends and having books to read that inspire you. And it's important sometimes that someone sees a vision outside of the swimming pool you're in, that there's an ocean, right? And I was saying that. I could see him in an ocean and he was swimming in the swimming pool that was crowded and everyone was peeing in it. And I don't even know the analogy there. And he was just like, no, I don't see it. Like, look at my age, look at where I'm at, look at what I'm going up against. This is it. 8 years later, last Thursday, we had planned dinner with his current executive team and spouses in the same restaurant, but they had no private rooms. And that day they called and said, hey, we have a private room opened up. You wanted one. Are you great? It was the same room.
Wow.
And as we walked in, he was like looking at me because we're passing all the private rooms. He's like, are they taking us to the same private room? So at a certain point, all the executives shared some thoughts, and he has someone new on his team that has had to move his family to our state to take this job. And so there was some emotion. And I just said, I just want to share this. And I said 8 years ago. So what I said to the executive team is it's also the failings and the fall downs and the mess ups that I could see had prepared this new executive team for exactly this moment. It wasn't in spite of, it was because of. It was because of some of the unemployments and underemployments Rob had lived through that he's exactly prepared for this position of leadership he's in now. And I think that's for all of us listening. That like so often we think the shipwrecks, permanently pulls us out of the game and we get comfortable swimming in the same little swimming pool because it's like what we know. And I'm giving my own self this advice because I'm not quite there yet. And you both teach this principle so well of like your mini trip analogy has been so helpful for me of like, can I do little day trips out? I'm not ready to sail on the ocean of whatever this new entity is. But can I do some day trips and get a little further out and come back and where do I need to regroup? And I think sometimes those day trips don't end great. And that's exactly the intellectual property you need for when you are sailing the ocean. And it is going great. And the wind is perfect. And everything's magical about that day. And the ocean looks beautiful and the dolphins are dancing and, those moments too. And so that literally just happened last week, and literally they sat us in the room, the exact room that had 8 years ago been like, oh, this is my fate. I'm stuck here forever. Mm. And so that would be my follow-up to what you shared, Eric, of like, are we okay with the seasons? And I'm not great at transition. I don't do great in the winter. We are not having a normal winter here this year, and my kids and I are both like actually happy, and our dad is scared because he watches the water table, so he's freaking out. But I think as humans, can we be okay with it being seasonal? and can we be okay with like right now it's gray out there and there's no leaves on the trees, and God's not panicked about that. But I've been living a season the last 2.5 years that's gone on much longer than I'm comfortable with. I don't see some clear, cool story at the end yet. I don't. I have learned sourdough. I said I would never write a book about sourdough. I wrote a book about sourdough. I keep trying to grow and meditate and pray and serve, but sometimes I can get a little too micro in my thinking. Like, this is the only swimming pool I'm ever going to be in. And my spouse, I could see his ocean. It was so clear for me, and he couldn't see it. So, like, share this podcast if you have a friend or a family member that's like, I'm swimming in this swimming pool and it's gross and I'm tired of the same people bumping into me, but I can't possibly see myself in a different place. Rob Condie is swimming in an ocean, and he did not see it 8 years ago.
For our listeners, what I think is so important about what you're saying is we love to talk about living intentionally, living boldly, and you're saying you're bringing a lot of complexity to the table here, saying you might be in a different season. You might want to give yourself some space to recognize where you are. You might want to make sure you're not acting from a place of fear and panic. Certainly if you're in a situation where you need to be practical, you're going to make those calls. But just that your life at any given season doesn't have to look the way anybody else's life looked. And it also doesn't have to look the way that you expected it to look. It doesn't mean that you aren't in the right place and that this isn't a season that can be for you, for your growth. And that even as you talk about this executive team, that even when you are in a season that feels like a season of failure, that is also a preparatory time where you are learning what's the gifts and skills that you're going to have for the next season, and to give yourself some space to recognize I maybe can't even see it right now.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's important to have people and resources around you when it feels really foggy. I have a neighbor that's a fireman, and he just shared the story of firemen when they go into a smoky room, where there's a fire and there's not a visual orientation. One of the firemen will stay out of the room and tap their axe or shovel or whatever they have, their tool, so that the other fireman that's going into that smoke can hear where to go back out to.
The way to retreat.
Yeah, to reorient back out. And I just think in a marriage and friendships, on a mastermind team you might be on, or with a corporate coach or a therapist, those are essential taps, because the smoke can go on a long time. I mean, it sounds great when I get to tell a story and put a bow on the end, but I'm living, bleeding wounds. I often teach and write and publish from my scars. I really highly value that, like vulnerable, authentic sharing. But there's some current bleeding wounds that are not scarred up yet, and I don't have the takeaway. Mm-hmm. And so I think from just a mental health standpoint, it's crucial that you have someone tapping.
To show you.
Yeah. To just know
way back.
You're way back. You're not lost in that smoke and that fog of professional, chronic illness, mental health, family dynamics, whatever it is.
Can I say one more thing on
that?
Yeah,
by all means.
Since you mentioned the word lost, I think also, and this relates to mental health as well, when we get into some of those seasons, we can feel helpless. Mm-hmm. We can feel victim. And like you said, that word lost. And one of the ways that we like to talk about that is that you can just do a reframe. Just because you don't know where you are or where you're going, lost feels very passive, but we like to instead use the word exploring.
Yes.
I'm looking around to see what my next move is going to be. Like you're like, I'm waiting for the right opportunity. Opportunities have come. I panicked, but I paused and I said no because I knew that wasn't it. That's exploring, right? And
which I remember you sharing that in your presentation a year ago, and that was super. Yeah, that was a really I'm getting a little victim in my own head. I got to reframe this, or I have the opportunity to reframe it, that this is exploration, and staying curious felt way less hopeless. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think you're very brave to be talking about it while still in the midst of it.
Thank you.
Which I know that, my period of kind of like professional destruction and I was very uncomfortable with it for years and didn't talk about it until we wrote 7 at Sea. In fact, I think that was the first time that I spoke about it publicly. very few people knew kind of the backstory. And so I think you're being very brave to talk about it now while it's still in the middle. And I guess one thing that I was thinking about is you were talking about how there was this time in when things were booming and you were doing your magazine and your radio, you had kind of like a multimedia identity, and you were very public facing. And in the meanwhile, you're talking about Rob being underemployed or unemployed. And I'm just curious, he's not here, so I can't ask him, but I'm imagining that there was probably some difficulty for him to be in that place in his life, juxtaposed with what was going on in your life. And now in some ways, things have shifted. Yeah. And I guess maybe we can all talk about this, but I'm just comparison is a hard thing when we compare, whether it's within a marriage, well, my spouse is succeeding while I'm failing, or vice versa, or my neighbors are having this good thing happen to them while meanwhile this bad thing is happening to me, or this is going right for my friends and this is going wrong for me.
It can go the opposite too, where you're like, I'm being so successful and now I'm talking to somebody who's in a down season and I feel guilty.
Yeah. And so I guess I'm just curious if that's something that, do you feel like that was present when things were, you were kind of riding high and Rob was feeling a little bit low? And if so, how did you manage that? And I think maybe we can just all talk about that place of how we can benefit from other people's successes. Anyway, I don't have a very well-formed question here.
No, I know what Rob would I think I know what Rob would share right now, and that is he's my biggest cheerleader. He's my biggest support. He believes in what I'm trying to contribute in the world, but something you probably both have learned about him as well is he's much more private and shy than I am. Yes. And I tend to always think, okay, that would be great in a book. So we're going to live it and then I'm going to share it, or I'm going to give it in a talk, or I'm going to share it on TV, or, and so one of the courageous things is that he's been supportive of me being very transparent about our shared lives. And I wrote a book a few years ago called The Stewardship Principle, and that's the next ocean I'm trying to approach, is a corporate version of that book, because it's very broad-based. It's very faith-based and family and health and all the things. And so when, Eric, you were talking, it's the principle I like to teach. Instead of saying my neighbor has the good stuff happening and I have the bad stuff happening, in my mind, it's a stewardship. It's a trust. And so I think what Rob would share with you, because he really does love that book. He read it while he had COVID and he was really sick, and he was sequestering and sick for a couple of days down in the basement. And he talks about how that shifted. And I was surprised, because he lives with me. Like, it was a principle I had talked about and been practicing for 10 years before I wrote it in a book. So I kind of was like, well, this is, I guess, why we write books, because he needed it written down, even though he lives with me and I talk about it. And I write this book with the idea that it's a principle, which means I switch into the opposite of that, which is ownership, all the time. And because it's a principle, it's not a destination. It's a principle. It's like, just like you were saying, Emily, about reframing. It's like you get to catch yourself. So when I find myself in ownership, one of the signals is I go into comparison. I'm in comparison more. If I go into ownership, I also tend to be outcome focused instead of offering focused. Those are two indicators for me. So in our marriage, he's repeated me back to me quite a bit the last 2 years. So do my kids. It's funny because my kids...
They're teaching you what you taught them?
Oh yeah, all the time. My daughter's like, Mom, you need to be more offering focused instead of outcome focused. And I think, or my son read Let Them by Mel Robbins and called me and he's like, did she plagiarize the stewardship principle? We had a joke about that because she's had great success with this let them theory, which is a little bit of like the stewardship principle. Stewardship is much more, I think, diverse in its approach of how you can apply it. But God has trusted me with this season. For your listeners that are going through a diagnosis, a divorce, an unemployment, whatever it is, if you can see it as a stewardship instead of like a judgment of your worth or the good stuff versus the bad. And there's different practices. The Stoics talk about it in a similar way. Buddhists talk about it in a certain way. As a Christian, I talk about it really God-related. But between you and I, who are the most inspiring people? I mean, my kids tease me all the time because I'm always like, we just went and saw a movie. Was it good? Yeah. And it's always, what? Let me guess, Mom, it's a true story. Like, to me, The true stories are the stories. I want to read Seven at Sea because it really happened to the Ortons. You know, someone could have written that as a fictional story and it would have been fine. But then it's like a version of Moby Dick and you're just chasing a whale all around the planet, right? And you never get the whale. Like, I mean, to me, the stories of Viktor Frankl in a concentration camp and him choosing optimism and gratitude to survive the worst of the worst is way more inspiring than what my fiction author friends, I'm not throwing shade at you, but what we can imagine. And so sometimes when I'm stuck in some victim and I'm hyper focused on outcomes and there's not a good like measurable on a chart to tell me I've been successful, and I start taking ownership through my comparisons of all the success I see on social media, I try to pull back and say, if this was my movie and I'm in the middle, what's the audience watching me do with this? You know, what's the audience cheering me on saying? They know the movie's not ending right now, but the last 2.5 years has felt like a long middle.
This is they would montage their way through this.
They would montage their way through and they would know, because they still got popcorn and there's still another hour to go, that there's still much to come. And so this poem that this friend wrote for my birthday, she talked about that. Like, this is not wasted time. This is the author of my life is not forgotten my plot line. But it feels that way. And I think I really want to give voice to women that had their babies turn 18. Emily, I'm holding space for you.
Thank you.
Because whether they are Down syndrome and going to be with you a long time or not, there's something about the completion of the offering of raising humans that is so significant. And I wasn't ready for how much that would impact me because I thought I had prepared somehow. I had prepared to like be something different and ready and expansed and like progressed. And it really has rocked me. It really has, because
Totally relate.
I just don't know I don't know if we need to sit in a hut in the Amazon together with women that are 55 and older and have no kids at home, or have kids at home but they all turned 18, and just look at each other. I don't know what that is, but there's something that I feel like we don't quite have language on for what this feels like. And it's sacred and it's uncomfortable. And then I'm gonna say that mother-in-law that died last year when we were together at 91, like the full completion of her creation. She had led the music 2 weeks before she died. I now feel like I need to apologize that I didn't call her more. And I remember watching her thinking, well, she sews and her grandkids come and hang out with her, and she volunteers in her church and she makes bread and shares it with her neighbors, and she would make little homemade Christmas stockings for a second grade class every year. I thought she had not, but then I thought, wow, she had lived 20 years without Rob's dad. And I don't know if this is my final takeaway, but maybe it's a wake up to notice the older people in our lives. I have some new kind of earned empathy of like sitting with your neighbor that's 80 and just seeing them and letting them talk to you about whatever they're talking in their heads about to themselves. There's something about this seasonal shift of life, this cycling of life, that is beautiful and divine and uncomfortable and scary, and I'm in the middle of it. And I said to Rob, we still have a lot of life to live. Like we think we've done a lot of things, and we have, you know, but if you think about our parents and their ages, we still have a lot going on. So one day we may be on a boat with the Ortons, maybe.
That would be amazing.
I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what I feel, is that it's a sacred stewardship, and I have a husband that reminds me that I'm not lost forever, and I have a new empathy of how lost he must have felt. We had a room in our house we called the unemployment office, and that's where he would go every day for almost a year. And he kept trying to do the laundry when he was unemployed, and I was getting bugged by that because I had a system, and I'm like, why are you doing laundry all the time? And now I see he just was like, what am I supposed to do with myself? And isn't that beautiful about marriage and aging and friendships and mother-in-laws, that we get to like have experiences and then look back and go, wow, I probably didn't know how my neighbor was feeling or my spouse was feeling, and now I get it a little bit more.
Chances to loop around. We like to talk about spiral staircase ascending up, and we come around to the same view from a different perspective, you know?
Yeah,
Keep refining the story.
I look at him a lot and say, sorry, I didn't realize how much this rocked your confidence in your identity when you lost your job those 2 times. I get it now. Because as a mom, I was like, yeah, I'm worried about paying the bills and getting food, but look, my kids get their dad. They get to see him more, you know? And I kept trying to pump him up like, you're so much more worthwhile than just your paycheck. You're not just that. And now I'm like, you know, I'm having those feelings. And he's like, you're so incredible and you've changed the world in so many ways. And I'm like, but I'm not bringing in enough money, you know? But that's not all who you are, you know? So.
Man, Emily would say those same things to me. And like, your kids get to spend so much time with you. And I was like, that's hard.
Yeah.
I want that, but I also want to pay the bills.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your book too.
Hey, thanks.
This thing you said you were never going to do, and you did
You
it.
did it.
Like, how did that
Sourdough and the Savior.
How did that
to us.
leap happen? Yeah.
Well, thanks for asking about it. It's under 65 pages. People of all faiths have picked it up because sourdough is one of those connecting things. And the
Do you get a loaf of sourdough with it?
Some have. You will.
You
will
could
be getting it.
have an endless supply of sourdough because she teaches you how to make it in the book.
Because
Yep,
we just got a new toaster, and it's long enough to put a slice of sourdough in it.
Whoa.
Yes, we got a special toaster
Okay, we
for
got to
that
plan
kind
a
of
get
bread.
together. We're due for a double date. So
We are due.
I didn't ever want to make. I just read a review from a snarky reviewer that was so positive and sweet, but he started out saying, I thought this was going to be cliche and I'm not a sourdough baker. And he gave this long review and it was so beautiful about how like I was authentic and honest and I was raw in places. And I do give tips and I share my recipe. And there's a huge mistake in chapter 4. I don't know, Emily, if you caught it. I give a list of Jesus's top 10 parables, and parable 10 and 2 were the same parable. And I know where that happened in the editing, but no one caught it after like 5 rounds of editing. And now it's been fixed, but I'm kind of hoping this first one is going to be worth like lots more because it has the mistake.
It's collector's edition.
Yeah, it's the collector's edition. But for me, I had a scheduled meeting with my publisher that day, and I had no thought of bringing up writing this book. And I was rushing to the kitchen to do a batch before I hopped on the Zoom meeting. And I felt God say, you know exactly what book to write next. And I was like, no, I've said I was never going to write about this because there's so many like YouTubers and bloggers and Instagrammers that are like sourdough experts. But for me, just like people that pick up your book that never go sailing for a year, I wanted it to be this invitation into a world that whether or not you were in the sourdough world or not, it was this living metaphor. And the feedback so far has been that it was that. I talk in the intro about a tiny little book. Is it At Sea? And I talk about, and yeah, Gifts from the Sea. It's really important book. Yeah, it was an important book when I was given it by Mary Kay Huntsman. So the governor's wife gave it to me as a gift, and beautiful note inside. And it was years ago when I was in the middle of like being a mom and the magazine and TV and billboards and all the things. And I read it thinking, well, now I'm of the age of Anne, right? Of the author. And like, I've never gotten to go away and live by the ocean and try to figure out all the small things of shells and sand teach you, you know? But I give a nod to that book at the beginning of like, to the gentle reader, like if this is not your journey and you don't stand in the kitchen and look at bubbling sourdough start, sit with me just long enough that maybe it will be a lived experience through the words on the page. Mm-hmm. And I hope that happened because the editor that worked on it is not a sourdough baker and she felt that. So I'm grateful for the metaphor because the Savior is really important to me. And this last 2.5 years, especially for your audience where it's not clear if it's going to work out, my connection with him has grown stronger in the unknown. And my connection with him and understanding of who he is has grown because I've practiced making sourdough. And I failed a lot. And so when I found the mistake a couple weeks ago of the first printing, I sat with it for a minute and I was like, I had some shame for a minute. And then I went right onto Instagram and was like, yes, there's a big glaring mistake. And yes, we just found it. And I don't know how we missed it. And of course, a book about the Savior is going to have a glaring mistake, because our perfection is not required. Our Theodore Roosevelt in the arena, messy mud on the face is what's required.
This was an offering.
It was an offering. It was an offering. And the parable that gets repeated, I've had a number of people say, maybe in our climate of our world globally right now, that was the parable that needed to be
Needed
repeated.
that one twice.
Yeah, it was the big tent parable. It's that everyone's invited. So, yeah.
Well, I can guarantee you that most of the people who have read our book have not gone and sailed with their family for a year. And I'm sure a lot of people that read your book have not and may not ever make sourdough.
It made me want to buy more sourdough.
Good. Harmon's has some good sourdough.
It made me want it to be gifted more sourdough. But I guess what I'm saying is I think it will. I think it can. We all need a good metaphor. We all need I'm with you that the true stories are the best ones. And whether people go out and sail or make sourdough, we all need to hear each other's stories. We all need to hear vulnerable stories because that helps us know that we're not alone. And when we're not alone, we feel hopeful. And when we feel hopeful, we have the strength to carry on. And so I think you're giving a really beautiful gift here with this book to people that are going to resonate with where you are, where you've been, and where you're going. None of us know where that is, but because you're being honest, because you're being vulnerable and authentic, people are going to get the help and the hope and the encouragement that they need.
I'll say for me something specific because I tried to show you earlier that I have many things underlined and starred, things that I was thinking of coming into this conversation, but also things where it was just like being able to sit down and have a conversation with you and speak to my heart about some of the things that I'm experiencing right now. For me right now, and it'll be different in next week or in another season. But for me right now, the gem at the center of this book was what you feed is what grows. And that is a very important stewardship principle.
Yep.
And a way to use my agency and a way to be empowered. And I did learn a lot about sourdough, so much more. And that's an actionable, practical takeaway.
Well, and I think what's so beautiful is I guested on another podcast, and he has a side talent that I didn't know about, that he does caricatures, like he'll go to weddings and parties and, but that's not his main career. And he said, when I was reading it, it was a reminder, like I've stopped just doing caricatures and giving them to my neighbor. And I hope people read it and realize that everyone has a sourdough something to share. Like, maybe it's you're really good at walking and you start a walking group, or maybe it's that you're really good at coming up with playlists and you share playlists. Like I have a friend that's so good at sending me inspirational music, and like any new music that comes out, like they'll send it over. And so I just think it's easy in a season of loss to get closed in and protect, and that self-preservation of like you're in pain and it's vulnerable and it's scary. And I am an advocate of you don't necessarily invite everyone into your space, your safe space during that vulnerable time. There's certain people like both of you where there's trust there, and I can show up any way I need to show up. And those are the people, like I think Emily and I were going to go to lunch with your daughter last year, and I was not doing well, and some of those family dynamics are still happening right now. And I was like, I'm not going to be fun at lunch. And I thought, if Emily and I are really friends, then I'm going to show up exactly as I am at this lunch. And it was a beautiful lunch with your daughter, and we were sharing and we were vulnerable. And so I think it doesn't mean necessarily you invite everyone in the arena into your safe space when you're vulnerable. But one of the biggest takeaways of this book is what has helped me the most in this season is finding something I could share. And sourdough has become that. And people keep trying to buy it from me. And I'm like, it's not a business, it's a ministry. And I will keep sharing it. And I promise you, the last couple of months, I'm like, with 2 kids in college, maybe I should start selling it. And I've decided, no, that will change what it is, like that Mexican fisherman. I don't want to change what it is. I want it to be a sacred offering, a ministry, a guide to connect with people and offer. But if sourdough is not your thing, everybody's got something that we need. Everybody does. I have not met one person on the planet that within a few minutes I can't identify, man, that's your offering in the world. I'm not good at that, or I am good at that, but it's beautiful. It lights you up. And sometimes it's the smallest thing. And I think we underestimate that because it doesn't feel measurable sometimes. You know, we can't do a yearly report on whatever that gift is of being a good listener. Or I'm really good at vacuuming, by the way, side note. And so I always tell people, like, if you ever need me to come vacuum, it's like calming to me and I love it and I'm good at it. Rob is really good at ironing and folding. I do most of the laundry right now in this season of life, but he's better at it than I am. So it's just a true fact. And so I would just say to your audience, I hope if you pick up the book or just this in this conversation, especially if you're in a painful season and you're in a vulnerable season and you're in a season of loss where it feels like there's not a lot, within boundaries, find something that you can make as an offering. And even the littlest thing, and that will carry you through that wandering season of, like, I mean, I'm sure you guys could say being on the boat, like, everybody had to get up and do their part. And I remember some of the stories you shared. There were days where everyone was sick, and was it only Eric and one of your daughters that were out taking care of things, right? And so I just think there's something beautiful about that idea that as humans, we need each other and we need to keep offering to one another. We were not created to isolate and to withdraw and stay in a cave. We were designed to be in community, and sourdough's my way right now.
You want to bring us home?
Well, thank you so much for everything that you so openly shared. Like, this conversation did have a beautiful shape to it. I think there was like some creativity and some scoring that will land differently for everybody who listens to it. And I would encourage people to order this. You can order it at Cedar Fort or from Amazon or where else.
And Walmart right now. Yeah, there should be a new place soon, but at this point it's Walmart, Amazon, and Cedar Fort.
So check that out. And where else can people hear more from you? If your voice resonated with them today and they want more of this real, relatable, vulnerable, and hopeful encouragement, where can they follow you?
Thanks for asking that. I'm on all the platforms, and I also have a little YouTube channel that's just my name. And when you have a unique name like mine, Ganel-Lyn, with no hyphen and no capital, if you type it into Google, you can find my website and all the links on there. And I love being a guest on a podcast, and then people find us on a run, like 2 months or 2 weeks from now, and then get to have this kind of conversation with them, even if it feels a little one-sided. And then I get a DM and they say, "Oh, I listened to you on this podcast." And that's also why I love writing books. When the greatest compliment is when readers say, "I could feel and hear you talking to me." I'm not the most gifted author, but I really try to make sure my voice is in the pages. And so it feels like an intimate conversation on my bed, which is always kind of my goal, is like, what would we say to each other when we're feeling the most real and vulnerable with each other? And so, I would love to hear from your listeners, and appreciate both of you for coming in a time in my life where, I feel a little adrift, and also that we're in similar stages of life. And so there's some relatability of like raising kids and then launching kids and then figuring out midlife, marriage, and all the things that come with that. That's so beautiful and also often not talked about. So thanks for being dear friends.
Oh, thank you so much. For people who are listening, I hope that you'll think about what season you're in, that you'll give yourself a lot of space and a lot of grace, and look at, like Ganel-Lyn said, what it is that you uniquely have that you could offer, and let that be something that you can share that can help you find some meaning in a waiting season, if that's where you are. And then we always like to end by asking,
what could go right? Before we wrap up, I just want to share the sailing update in case you're interested in coming sailing with us. We have a fun plot twist. We are actually looking to open up a last-minute trip to Bora Bora. That's in French Polynesia, down by Tahiti. We'll actually start in an island called Raiatea, which is just next to Tahiti, and then we'll sail one way over to Bora Bora. So we'll be flying home out of Bora Bora. That is going to be May 2nd through the 9th. So if you're interested, we do have to make sure that it's a full boat for that trip to come together. And there's a few people that have already expressed interest. But if you want to go to Bora Bora soon, May 2nd through 9th, down in French Polynesia. Then June, July, August are all sold out with our Mediterranean trips. We do have space on our September Norway trip, September 3rd through the 9th. We have room for up to 4 people, 2 cabins. So if you want to join us in Norway, we're going to be sailing the beautiful Lofoten Islands. I am personally super excited about that. And then our September Italy trip is sold out, but Mexico in October, 5 through 10, we have a spot for 1 solo female traveler, Mexico 5 through 10 in October. And then in the Bahamas, 9 through the 14th, we have room for 1 solo female traveler. Otherwise, those trips are also sold out. In December, 7th through the 12th, we're going back to the Virgin Islands, and we have room for up to 5 people, 2 cabins and 1 solo male traveler. That's December of this year. And we're starting to piece together our 2027. And what we know so far is that in March 1st through the 6th, we're going to be back in the Bahamas. And so we have more cabins and space available if you want to hit us up for the Bahamas next year, March of 2027. And that is the sailing update.
We can talk about trips all day, but it's more fun to hear from someone who's been aboard. Here is a recent guest takeaway.
Hi, I'm Kriya, and I don't know that I had a fear, but I think my biggest concern was just coming alone and how the interpersonal dynamics would be with a bunch of people that I didn't know in close quarters. And not only was that not a problem, but it feels like family. And the most unexpected was like how quickly the bonds were formed. And I think that the way the Ortons have raised their family, that like spills out into whatever community they touch. Absolutely. Which is really cool. So let's see, what am I taking home with me? We were talking about highlights today, and I'm like, man, there's been like 5 highlights every day. For sure, feeling like I'm learning the ropes in just like 4 or 5 days. I feel like I could do this forever. I'm like, this is better than what I expected, and it's doable. And yeah, just say yes. Don't even think about it. Just go. And I know I didn't hesitate when I booked it. I like booked the call and just did it, and just whatever step was next, I hit the button and did the thing. And I would do it exactly the same way all over again. So do it.